Well, welcome, friends, back to another episode of the Performance Mindset Show. I'm your host, Amy Calandrino, CEO of Beyond Commercial and author of the book From Perfect to Real. This podcast is all about leveling up in leadership in life. So if you're looking to grow, you're tuning into the right show. While you're at it, please press subscribe and let's get right into it. So today's guest is someone I've admired for a long time. Not just for what he's built in commercial real estate, but for how he's done it. Alan Buchanan is a partner at Lee & Associates, and he's a trusted advisor to family-run businesses, which I really can respect and emulate. And now an author, so we share another thing. And his new book, The Sequence, isn't just a playbook for building a sustainable CRE career. It's a personal legacy product written with his grandkids in mind. So over 4 decades in, 2,000 transaction, Alan has proven that success doesn't have to come at the cost of your own values. He's built his family based on faith, family, process, and purpose. In a world that we often are trying to chase quick wins, he's kind of the steady voice that we need. So we're going to talk today about everything to do with the book, and we'll probably talk about commercial real estate, social media, all the different things. So I can't wait. So here's to our conversation today, Alan.
Indeed. Thanks a million. I'm a big fan of Mrs. Calandrino. So this is quite a bucket list item for me. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And then you have Alan spelled the right way. My brother's name is Alan, Allen. So I always remember, like, it's easy to remember to spell your name correctly versus the other people. They don't spell it correctly.
Right. And it's so funny you mentioned that. People that have known me my whole life still misspell it. My dad used to misspell it. So I said, Dad, you gave me the name. So how can you misspell it? But whatever.
So you said that you wrote this book as a letter to your grandkids. Why did you frame it that way? And what do you think they really take from it one day?
I framed it that way because I wanted to create a voice that they could understand. Our youngest is a year old and he obviously is clueless, but our oldest is 10 and he is not clueless. And so I wanted to make sure that this whole commercial real estate, what Papa does, and actually two of our grandkids' dad work with me. So I wanted to make sure that it was written in a manner that they could understand, but also in sort of a timestamp to say 6 grandkids. Now, hopefully by the time I'm gone, maybe there are a couple more that come along, and they will have this permanent idea and permanent written narrative of how Papa made a living. So that was one of the biggest reasons I wanted to write the book, because I want, as I know you are an author and you've done a similar thing. Um, you and I both believe that we have a lot to say and we have a lot to give back. It's been a great industry for our family. And I just wanted to make sure that this is all written down someplace in perpetuity that all can enjoy and all can benefit from going forward.
It's interesting. You wrote yours as a letter to your grandkids, and mine was almost a letter to myself not to go back to that place ever again and create a framework that I think part of it I couldn't control, which was like my postpartum depression and those kinds of things. But there was a lot of other things that happened that caused my mindset to get to where it was. And it was kind of like, don't go back there. Like, start anew, connect with people like you, and create that framework for, success for myself moving forward and kind of create those like guardrails. But then, now that I've really, I've read your book, I thought to myself too, I'm like, this is going to be around for my kids and they'll understand where I was, why I made the decisions that I did, and how ultimately it really has always been with them in mind and for our family. And then hopefully, later on I'll have grandkids and all that too. So
Yeah, and when you think about it, think how cool it would be. And I know, speaking personally, maybe you have a different story, but speaking personally, how cool would it have been to have written or your grandmother that you could look back and rely upon. I know my mom, when my mom turned 75, we had a big party for her, and she shows up at the party and she's got this big book of or this big box of bound books, and she had taken it upon herself to write some of her career decisions, and so we have that. But how cool would it have been? I never knew one of my grandfathers. He died before I was born. Certainly knew my other one very, very well. Certainly knew both my grandmothers. But how cool would it be to have a narrative in place that says, hey, here's why I married your grandmother. Here's why I chose the vocation I did. Here's why you never knew me as a person that drank alcohol, but there's a whole story behind that. And how did that come about? So, I just think I'm just so pleased with the way it turned out, and I'm so excited for this generation and future generations to share it. And Amy, what you've created, by the way, in your book, which I just am a huge fan. I was texting you all Sunday as I'm listening to it. I listened to it nonstop for a day and a half. I just thought it was amazing, and it frankly, it's got some of the same characteristics. I mean, that's a timeless message that you've delivered, and it can benefit millions of people. So I, for one, am going to get a banner and start marching around downtown Orange, California, and tell them they need to buy this book.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I think you could probably agree too that writing the book was beneficial for yourself too personally, I'm sure, to reflect upon your
It, it,
journey.
it definitely was. And I haven't shared this with anyone, but the real catalyst that got me off the bench, so to speak, and got the book into form was I was giving a a seminar to our Atlanta office, our Lean Associates Atlanta office, and the title of the seminar was Qualify. And as you know from reading the book, qualify is the cue within sequence,
Mhm.
and I frankly believe it's the most important element within sequence. Sequence are the steps of a real estate transaction and also the steps of your career. But I really am a big believer in qualify. So I'm giving this seminar, and this gentleman in the front row raises his hand and he says, hey, by the way, when are you going to write a book? Because this is just such great information. And I'm a learner that reads and learns that way. So when are you going to write a book? And it's like this light went off in my head. And I said, okay, there's the moment, right? There's the providence. There's God speaking in your ear saying, all right, I've given you everything you need, get it done. And so that was in March of this year. I had already thought about 3 or 4 book ideas, and that's when this one took center stage and became a reality.
Wait, you started writing your book in March?
No,
Oh,
no, no. I started earlier. I started earlier in the year writing down
oh,
thoughts,
okay.
but once I got it sort of zeroed in,
Mhm.
right? Once I got it sighted in, then it was just nonstop. And yeah, the vast majority of it was written since March of this year.
That's incredible. Mine took
Yeah.
me almost 2 years. but I
Um,
also had the podcast and my children and the business, and so I wish, like, I probably could have knocked it out, quicker otherwise, but, c'est la vie. It was the right time because then I got to join this whole we've had a whole, bunch of commercial real estate folks, including you and me and Bob Knackle and Chad Griffiths. Like, we've had this whole like season, this first half of 2025 of authors.
and then Ken Ashley's
Oh
book
yes,
comes out later in the year, and although Nick Huber is not a
oh
real estate
yes.
broker, his book, which is amazing, by the way.
I
So
haven't
yeah, you're right. You're right. It's like I say, that's what, although you don't fall in this category, but I say that's what old white guys do. They write books. So
So it's interesting. Yeah, I hope my show note editor, Jen, as you're processing this, yeah, if you could put a link to Bob Knackle's book, Selling Buildings, Chad Griffiths, Industrialize, Nick Huber, The Sweaty Startup. Of course, you're going to have a link to Alan's and then a link again to mine. I think those are the 5 main ones. And then maybe a link to Ken Ashley CRE, I think is his like personal website. And I'm sure people can follow that page to find out when his is available. So yeah, I know he was
Yeah.
hoping to have it this year, but I think just with the summit and business and everything, you don't really want to be launching in the middle of the holidays because people are so distracted, and you want to be able to do things like this, like a podcast, and you want to do all the things. And so I think it'll be early next year if, I'm kind of speaking for him, but that's what I understand.
Yep.
You talk about some pivotal moments, Boy Scouts, baseball, golf. Which one, in these different moments and different parts of your life, like what do you still think shows up in the way you negotiate or lead? Things you've been involved,
You know,
moments or things
I
you've done.
Yeah, the chapter you're referring to is contrarian decisions that I've made that have helped build my career, and I go through 7 or 8 of them. The first pivotal decision, Amy, that I made was in 1970 when my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And in 1970, if someone was diagnosed with any form of cancer, it was pretty much a death sentence. And so I was 14 years old at the time. I was sitting in homeroom, and at that time, in Texarkana, Arkansas in 1970, someone came across the intercom and said, "Alan Buchanan, please come to the office." Well, I knew my mom was having surgery that morning to remove we thought, a benign tumor. And I went to the front office, and my paternal grandfather and my maternal aunt were waiting to pick me up and take me to the hospital. And I knew at that point something wasn't right. Something had to be badly wrong. And I asked them, "Hey, how's mom okay?" And neither one of them would tell me. So I knew, I had hoped my mom hadn't died, but I knew that something was terribly, terribly wrong. And so I get to the hospital, and you can imagine the chaos of that waiting room. My dad's in tears. There are half a dozen people there and wringing the hands. And, oh my God, how could this happen? And she's too young. And, she was a little bit younger than you are when that happened. So I just excused myself from the chaos. I went into the men's room, and I prayed. I said, "God, I don't know what this means, and I'm way too young to understand it. But I know that from what I hear in church, I know that you've got this if I just simply give you my life. And so I'm giving you my life." And so I gave my life to Jesus Christ in October of 1970. And I got to tell you, or 70 or 71, I think it was October of 1970. I think that's right. Um, but that's been the most pivotal decision I've ever made. And it shows up every single turn in the road. And all of my future decisions after I made a decision to follow Jesus Christ, all of my decisions have followed that. When I went into the commercial real estate business, when I got married to my wife, when we decided to move to Orange, California, when we've had issues with children over the years, grandchildren, all of those things, we go to the Lord in prayer. So that's frankly been the most pivotal. And frankly, without that foundation, without that framework, without that sort of constant North Star, I wouldn't be the person, the broker, the individual that I am today.
I would agree with that. I was more loyal of a follower, younger, and having that foundation in my life. But later on, I've kind of drifted. But since I've been more involved and more committed and committed myself there, it's been transformational. And I can only imagine the difference it's made for you. And I mean, it's not a perfect journey, and life is not, but
Right.
as long as you're still following that North Star, it's important. That's so powerful. Um, the did you find, though, what I found in business is like I don't hide my faith, and I put it out there. I had a client of mine that was on my podcast a couple years ago, and she's very much a believer, and she really puts it out there. And of course, I respect what anyone else like shares, but I find that I find other people like you and like others who have the same beliefs, and it's amazing to find the others that you can connect with. Do you find that to be the same?
Right. I do. And I'm sharing the faith. I believe the Lord asks us all to be disciples of the word. I try not to do it in a hypocritical, finger wagging sort of a
Oh, it just
method,
pricked my finger. But yeah, I know what you're
right?
saying. Yes.
And it's difficult because the last thing any of us frankly wants to be is a hypocrite. And I know part of your journey in writing the sport framework, part of your journey was not really frankly giving a rip about what others think. But I think down deep there's a part of all of us that does in fact care what others think and what others perceive. And so I don't necessarily lead with it. I it's always there. It's always sort of running in the background. And when I do see an opportunity and I believe it's an opportunity that I should capitalize upon, I do it. But this is probably the first in this book and on some of the podcasts I've done, it's probably the first, real outward broadcast of my faith.
Right.
Those that know me, those that work with me, those that live with me and love me, they all know how deeply embedded my faith is in my life and my career and everything I do. But yeah, just a little bit careful because as well as I have clients that aren't believers. I have clients that are Jewish that are just as loving and giving as any human being you'll ever
Right.
want to meet. So Amy, I just try to live what I believe, and I try to set a wonderful example for all, and that's worked okay so far.
Well, I mean, we're 55 years just about from that decision, so it seems to be working out well.
55 years, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
God, how did that happen?
I know. You've done over 2,000 transactions. What's the one step in the sequence that most brokers undervalue but you swear by?
Qualified.
Yep.
Yeah, we touched on it a bit
That's what I was
earlier.
going to say. So my next question is, let's talk about
Yeah,
qualifying. What's your go-to
yeah.
question to figure out if a potential client is really worth working with?
Well, the first two letters and then the last letter, the Q, the U, and the Y, all sort of work in tandem together, rather. The Q stands for quantitative need, the U stands for urgency, and the Y stands for yearning, which is yearning is a catalyst, something that causes urgency to occur. And so I go through a couple of examples in the book, and I'll share one real quickly with your listeners who haven't had the benefit of reading it. Um, our grandson, our 10-year-old grandson, came to us in April and he said, "Papa, I want to dye Easter eggs." And I said, "Yeah, that'd be amazing. Let's do it." And he says, "Okay, let's go to Albertsons and buy eggs." And I said, "Well, Easter's not for 2 weeks, and Nana and I don't eat eggs, so there's no reason for us to go to the store today to buy eggs. We'll get them in a couple of weeks." Well, did we have a quantitative need? The answer is absolutely we did. Quantitative need is we needed eggs in order to dye Easter eggs for Easter. The urgency at that point was what was lacking. Yeah, we had the quantitative need, but we had no urgency to act right this second. And so where the why or the yearning comes in is what's that catalyst that causes the urgency to fulfill a quantitative need? And for us, it was a circular that appeared in the mail. And all of a sudden it said, "Hey, eggs today are half price," right? So that became the yearning, which triggered the urgency, which caused us to fulfill the quantitative need. So those three are, frankly, really good ways to get started in your qualification process. And then you go into the A, which is the authority. Is the person with whom you're dealing really the person that signs the lease, that signs the purchase and sale agreement, that makes the decision, that has the capital allocation, et cetera? The L stands for loyalty. Are they loyal to you? Do you have a signed agreement? And I go through a very in-depth explanation of, hey, just because you've got a signed agreement doesn't mean they're necessarily loyal. Because loyal, it means to me that they're sharing with you intimate secrets as to why they're behaving the way that they are. Those aren't secrets you necessarily share with your competition, but those are indicators of being loyal. The I stands for intention. You know, do they have proper intentions and do they have proper expectations on what the market will bear? Right now in Southern California, we're dealing with very much a tenant's market. However, a lot of the ownership is institutional. They still have 2022 in their minds. Occupants have 2025 in their minds. And so there's this huge disconnect. So is there a proper allocation, proper calibration of the intention? Do they have proper market expectations? The fuel is what comes in the form of human capital. It comes in the form of money. It comes in the form of banking relationships. It also comes in the form of time. I mean, how many times just had this happen where we struck a deal and there were several elements that needed to be taken care of as a part of the process and the follow-up? Well, they didn't have a person assigned to do that. And so to get timely responses to emails, to get lease comments turned, all those sorts of things became a real impediment to us getting the deal done. So the fuel is, do they have a person? Do they have the financial capability? And then now we're back to the why. So it all is a framework within the sequence, which helps you determine whether this deal has a good chance of moving forward. I say in the book that once I've gotten something qualified and once I've gotten something under control, my hit ratio is 76%. I close 76% of the deals that reach the fourth stage in the sequence. And in large part, I believe it's because of the Qualify framework. The other thing that's really cool about Qualify is you can use it as a post-mortem, either for a deal that you made or a deal that you failed to make, by going through and saying, was there a quantitative need, or was this tenant or owner just trying to game the system to get a better deal from their existing landlord? Did I have it? Did they have urgency, and did that urgency tie into some sort of a catalyst? In the business you and I do, which is family owned and family operated, typically based, those catalysts generally center around 4 or 5 things, such as a divorce, a death, a disposition, some sort of a debt event. That becomes a catalyst that creates that urgency. So when I have failed to make a deal, I've gone back and looked at, why did I fail to make it? And in large part, it's because I didn't have a quantitative need, or there was a misalignment of expectations. That happens to me quite a bit. I figure if I get it under control and I control it long enough, I can let the market be the bad guy and I can make a deal. But a misalignment of expectations is a really, really big one. So I hope that answers your question. That was a long diatribe.
I I agree with you. I think if anyone's going to read, like, hey, I have enough time to read one chapter and deploy it would be the Qualify chapter. I personally have been, mine's more basic. I call it like a BANT qualification, and budget, authority, need, time frame. But I don't have the yearning and the other components that you're talking about. And I noticed too, especially on the authority. I got a call, I got a lead today, and it's the chief, it's the head of operations. And then, they have 6 locations in Florida. And then I'm like, well, don't you, most businesses with your number of locations, have, a broker? What's going on here? Well, we've dealt with JLL, in the past, and they did this, and then I did this. And then I'm like, are they a difficult client, or what's going on? Is there enough meat on the bone? So I'm going to look at everything and then, put together an assessment, but I'm going to want to talk to the owner and dive in deep, and whether I want to get into, get further on this journey with them or not. And, but I think the qualification is, I think, a lot of brokers are like, there's a shiny new deal, it's exciting, I could make all this money. Well, yeah, but if you don't have the foundation, and it's not really qualified, then you don't. And I do agree with the postmortem too. I've especially younger in my career, I had a number of wild goose chases.
Yeah, we all do. And I do to this day. And you believe once again that, I tell the story in the book about a gentleman. We sold a multi-tenant industrial project in down the street from our office, and we sold it for $3 million call it 2015 to a gentleman on the west side of Los Angeles. A year later, he calls and said, "Okay, I'm ready to sell the building." And mind you, he had fired the property manager, he had run off 20% of the tenants, and he had managed to reduce the existing tenancy by another 10%. And so, as well as I, the value that he could have created was now frankly down the drain. And we asked him what his price expectations were, and he said, "My price expectations are $10 million." Guy paid 3, reduced his occupancy by 20%, reduced the existing occupancy's lease rates by another 10%, yet he believed his property was worth $7 million more. And I asked him, I said, "On what planet do you believe the property's worth $10 million? Well, it's on a lighted intersection and the market's on the uptick and money's cheap. And I just believe I can get $10 million." And so my partner and I really did a deep introspective, is this an assignment that we really want? We're going to have to educate this clown in terms of what the market really will bear. We decided to take a flyer because we were convinced if we didn't do it, one of our competition was, and we didn't want to see our competition's name on a comp. So the real quick moral of the story is we ended up selling it about 6 months later for $4 million, which was probably even more than it was worth to begin with. But anyway, he made a cool million in a year. But why did that happen? It happened because there was such a misalignment of expectations, but we had enough time and we allowed the market to be the bad guy. And the market proved to him that $10 million was just completely out of sight. Anything north of 4 was out of sight. So, yeah, that's just one quick example of intention. But that occurs and happens to me a lot where there's a misalignment. And I think if I can get enough time and let the market be the bad guy, I can make a deal. But that is, in today's market, that's a really big if.
Well, yeah, today for sure. So I had a listing a couple years ago that's kind of boomeranged. It's relisted, and I actually have a buyer buying it for what my broker opinion value was, because the other broker was able to convince the guy to lower his expectations by a couple million. So, which was great. So, but I'm glad it kind of boomeranged back to me. But he had such a misalignment that it was difficult, but it was good because and it being good PR for me at the time, because it was a very well-known intersection. There was a lot of coverage when I had the listing, and sometimes you do take those flyers, and it's like it is, like you said, a calculated risk. So
Yeah. But so tracking along just real quickly, the sequence. So the S stands for source, and I go through 4 or 5 different ways that folks source business. The E is evaluate. I think the evaluation stage is pretty important because the evaluation is when you meet with a client. I use the focus framework, which is Mark Faust from Mark Faust's book that our coaching friend, you're my coaching friend, uses quite a bit. But the focus questioning in an evaluation meeting to me is just very, very critical. And that's where you really discover, is this client a good match for my business? And am I a good match for his or her business? And so, and now you're into the qualify piece. So what I like to do once I have sourced the opportunity, I've met with a client face to face, I've gone through an evaluation process, I've made a determination, yeah, this is someone with whom I can do business. I then look at the qualify steps and I go through each and every one of them. And if something's off, in other words, if there's a misalignment of intention, if he's not the decision maker or she's not the decision maker, if they don't have the yearning, if they don't have the fuel, in other words, they're a startup and they're trying to buy a building. Well, great, but there's some real pitfalls in doing that. And that may not necessarily be in your best interest. I then look and say, how can I shift these elements of qualify from grayed out areas to checked boxes? In other words, how can I ensure that there's the proper intention? How can I ensure that they have the proper fuel to make a deal? How can I have a conversation with them about their yearning? how can I have a conversation with them about a quantitative need? In fact, if you re-rack your warehouse building here, you probably don't need more space. You just need a more efficient layout. So it can really, it works at the beginning, it works in the middle, and it works at the end of a deal or a failed transaction to help you understand and recalibrate going forward.
Well, yeah, it's funny you said that our friend utilizes the focus questions. I think reframing it and then figuring out where you can bridge the gap to get that alignment is important. So you said in the book you talked a bit about coaching, scaling, and systems. One thing I want to talk about first is coaching. You were already a top producer. Why did you do coaching, and what specifically shifted for you after working with the Massimo Group?
Yeah, Massimo Group. And once again, a shout out to our friend Rod Santa Massimo and my personal coach, Doug Molyneux, who was he's one of the gentlemen I mentioned as an early mentor. And I just can't thank Doug enough. And Doug is just one of these rare human beings that has amazing tactical ability, but amazing empathy at the same time. And just can't say enough for Doug Molyneux.
Yeah.
Uh, for me, Amy, I believe that I was a solid producer. I was consistently a top 5 producer in my office. I was consistently a mid 6-figure producer, which I made a very handsome living based upon the split profile of my company. My wife Carla and I had spent time raising kids and making sure they were properly educated and launched, et cetera. So there was just an awful lot that I know you're going through now with your young family. It's just an awful lot that took priority. And did business take priority that during those years? Between you and me, it didn't. My priority was different. My priority was making sure I had a stable marriage, stable household, wonderfully productive, polite kids. Yeah, did I have to make a living at the same time? Of course, but it wasn't my primary focus. And so then flash forward, 2017, 2018, and I'm looking around and I'm going, gosh, I'm 60 years old. I believe I've got more gas in the tank. I don't believe I've ever achieved the quote unquote elite status in
Mm-hmm.
terms of earning. And how do I get there? And one Saturday afternoon, my wife walked into my garage office and she said, "Hey, I just finished a book by Jen Sincero. It's called How to Be a Badass." And she goes, "If you were to become a badass producer, what would you do?" And I said, "Well, it's very simple. I'd hire the Massimo Group." And she said, "Then I want you to call them. I want you to hire them, but I want you to do everything that they tell you to do. I don't want you to debate with them. I don't want you to argue with them. I don't want you to try to overlay what you've been doing for the past number of years onto what they're telling you to do. Do it." And so I did. And that's the reason I initially chose coaching. And then Doug and I sat down and I said, "Doug, look, I've been a solid producer. I want to be a consistent 7-figure producer because in my mind that was elite
Mm-hmm.
status." This was 2018. And he said, "Let's spend 6 months. Let's understand your metrics. Let's understand how many calls it takes you to get a completion, how many completions to get a meeting, et cetera." And he says, once we have those metrics, we can then reverse engineer a program where you can make 7 figures. And that's what we did. And I have done that consistently for the past 7 years. Now, some would say, well, gee, the easiest way to do that is you just work more hours and you do more deals. Well, actually, the opposite's the case. I work fewer hours. I work fewer deals now, and I make 3 times as much money as I did in those years. And it's been a remarkable transformational experience. And so I have very, very, very good things to say about the Massimo Group, very good things to say about Doug, about Rod, about what Rod's created. But I got to tell you, if you embark on a coaching journey, as I know you
Mm-hmm.
have, you got to do what they tell you to do. You can't mail it in. And if you don't have the mindset, I know you talk a lot about mindset on your program. If you don't have the mindset that I am going to listen, even if it's difficult, even if it's something that I, inherently disagree with, not from an ethics or integrity standpoint, but it's something that I've not done, right? If you're not of that mindset, don't waste your time, don't waste your money, because it's not going to work for
Right.
you. But if you can shift that mindset, it's transformational.
Absolutely. When I worked with them, I easily in that year more than doubled, where I was at. And I just had some other things going on that I couldn't continue the journey, at that time. But it's interesting. I just had a conversation with a friend a few days ago, very similar. It's like, I'm very consistently mid six figures, and I'm ready to do, to be a seven figure producer. And I believe, even with my little children and all the different things, that I could definitely do that. And but I need to do some realignment to bring in like extra support around me and some different things so that I can do that, which is well underway. And there'll be more to be shared about that later on this year. So,
Yeah,
but, I mean, you have to like figure out, and then also client selection, all the different things. But it's funny. I got calls from Rod's office this morning, and I'm like, maybe I'll do that too. And then I'm just basically throwing gasoline on the fire and do it all at the same time.
Yeah, it's funny. You and I actually met in Orlando, Florida in 2019,
Yep.
and I believe you were well on your way with young Giovanni. If I recall, you had to leave the immersion early because you were starting to go into
Yes, that
labor.
is correct.
Did I recollect that correct?
That is correct.
And I thought, my God, who is this? Who is this animal that's just here? And you were just, I remember you just being incredibly intense and asking great questions and taking all these copious notes. And here you are, 9.5 months pregnant. I thought, wow, that's amazing.
I had him just a couple days later. I went to the hospital and they're like, yep, you've started labor. So I labored for a few days. And after some eggplant parmesan, a couple of days later, I had a Giovanni the next day. I guess eggplant helps facilitate things. So it's kind of funny. But no, then the last few years I've been more so focused on family, figuring things out business wise, figuring out and, kind of laying this new, construct for myself, and like, how do I balance all those things? And it's time to work on my production though. Like I'm putting it out to the world. Check in with me in the next year and see where I'm at and hold me accountable.
I'm sure you've looked, and I know that I have, and I've got a slightly longer runway than you. But one of the things that I see that occurs in any business, I saw it happen to my mom and dad. My dad was a very successful business owner, had a family-owned and operated business, which is ironic because that's who I serve today. But Dad was one of these that, he was never there when I woke up and got ready for school. He was rarely there late in the day as we're finishing up, and which would have been wonderful time to spend with your dad, right? And I see that happen in our business where people have little kids, they have marriages, they have and they have a business, and they're trying to juggle all three of those at the same time, and it's tough. It's really, really tough. But once again, I fall back on faith because I really believe that my priorities were correct during those years.
Yeah.
My place was with my growing family, and sure, I had to make sure I provided for them, but they didn't know they just knew if I wasn't there. They didn't know if I was at a bar or if I was closing a multi-million-dollar real estate transaction. That didn't really matter. The fact was I wasn't there. And so I just believe it's so critically important as a young producer that you learn to balance all the elements of your life, because it's easy to look and say, well, gee, when I'm 55 years old, then I'll have relationships with my kids. Well, guess what? If you're not building a relationship with those kids when they're tiny, and they know you as the guy that shows up for dinner and sits in the recliner and has a beer and watches the game, that's not a relationship. And it's just very difficult when they're teenagers to then become a big part of their lives. I've not seen many do that successfully. So balance is so critical. And I go into great detail about balance in the book.
And I think it's valuable. I 100% agree with you. I think keeping, and we have similar methodologies in both of our, paths, is, really prioritizing the faith and the family. And I
And the fitness
know.
and the finances, right?
And
The fitness and the finances.
yep, fitness and finances, and then I really very much follow my energy. If it's not an afternoon, I'm taking my kids to like golf lessons, and I'm generally like in the gym. And even if I end up with extra work that day, I figured out at my gym that on the treadmill it fits my laptop perfectly. And maybe I'm not getting in a perfect workout that day, but it's all about trying your best and doing the best that you can, in the best way possible. So one thing I wanted to talk about is, but yeah, and then if you put in my show notes too, Jen, though, about the Massimo Group, because I think they're terrific and Rod's great. But I really like too the book he just did with Bob Knackle. It's been great. Have you had a chance to read that one yet?
No, I haven't. I haven't. That's definitely on my list. I wanted to make sure I got yours read. I wanted to make sure I got Chad's read, and yeah, I've been kind of working on getting mine promoted, and you know how that goes. So
It's so funny as I'm on the programming co-chair for Commercial Real Estate Influencer Summit, and we were going to do a page in the book of all the people that have launched books this year, with you included. And then we were just so afraid we were going to miss someone, and we have to go to print like today. Actually, it's going to the printers today, and I realized we would have forgotten Nick. I'm so glad, because like he's like a friend of the commercial real estate community. I'm like so. Well, I want to talk about a couple more things, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. But you started blogging before most brokers knew what it was. What pushed you to do that?
I started blogging in 2009, and it was very simple. We had a little bit of an economic reset, as you recall, in 2008. And my business in 2008 was I had a half a dozen investors. These were private investors. They owned, portfolios of 1 to call it 10 buildings. And I had built relationships with all of them. Each year we'd sell a couple of buildings. We'd redeploy those funds into another through a tax deferred exchange. So I had great control. I had great business. I was playing golf 3 days a week. I frankly wasn't working that hard, but I was working hard on behalf of those 6 clients. And then the financial calamity hit us, and all of a sudden my private investors couldn't borrow money anymore. It made no sense to sell assets. Purchasing assets was consequently tough because they didn't have the proceeds to roll into new purchases. So I had to retool. I had to completely rebuild my business starting in 2009. Well,
Mm.
about the same time, my wife Carla, hey little girl.
Yes, Julie.
uh,
Julie got sent home from school sick yesterday, so she's been hanging
oh
out at home
no.
today.
Hi Julietta, nice to meet you. I'm Mr. Buchanan. um, and she's what, 4?
She's
Is she
4.
4?
Yes, she's
I've
4.
got a. That's cool, amazing. Um, anyway, at the same time, my wife Carla decided to go back to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising to get an advanced degree in apparel manufacturing. She comes home from school one day. She says, "You need to start blogging." Mind you, 2009. No clue what blogging even was. And I said, if I do that, 2 people will read it. I'll read it twice, and you may read it for a third time, but nobody's going to read that. She goes, "You're missing the point. Only 2 people will read it. I'll read it. You'll read it." And she goes, "No, you're missing the point." She goes, "You need to do what you do every day, post it online. Ultimately, you become the authority." And she said, "That's what I call working out loud. You work once
Mm-hmm.
and you publish it, and that becomes your digital footprint." And so that's what got me started. That's when I started writing about things that I do every day. And yeah, I've done it for almost 16 years.
My goodness. And I think it's all about consistency. I
100%.
so I think anyone who hasn't gotten the sequence should definitely get the book. I like also the way I like how it's all broken up into different acronyms. It makes it very easy to remember, not only just to qualify, but then overall. So is there anything in the book that we haven't talked about that you would like to chat about, or overall that you wanted to share today that we haven't chatted about?
Let me just give that just a real brief thought here. So the book is broken up into three parts. The first part is the decisions that created the career. The second part is the sequence, which is the framework, and then the last part is the legacy play and the systems and what have you. So this book it's part tactical, which is the sequence framework, but yet it's anecdotal because I like stories and I like to learn based upon someone. Your book is amazing with that, by the way. The stories that you share and the resources that you bring in and quote, I think that's just phenomenal. So mine's similar in that regard. But then it's also a legacy play. You hear from someone that's been in the business for over 4 decades, and
Mm-hmm.
frankly, some of the warts, some of the missteps, some of the successes, et cetera. So it's not your typical textbook commercial real estate book. It
Mm-hmm.
is, it's part self-help, it's part anecdotal, it's part legacy, it's part tactical. So everyone that's read it has thoroughly enjoyed it. I've gotten amazing, amazing reviews and people that have reached out and said, "Hey, I just finished it. And gosh, I had no idea." Even our office manager, I'm at lunch the other day, and she says, "I just finished your book. I can't believe that. I found out things about you I didn't know, and I've known you for 40 years, et cetera, et cetera." So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know. I want to take certain parts of it. I'm one of those people. I'm a very visual person, and then put certain acronyms and have like a cheat sheet on my desk. Because I mean, it's a funnel. I mean, especially if you're trying to qualify people and all those different things, and having that framework in front of you so you don't miss anything. And if you do, then again later, like you talked about, playing the tape. So and figuring
Right.
out what you could have
Exactly.
done differently. Well, this has been great.
Exactly.
How is the best way for someone to get a hold of you? Is it LinkedIn or your blog, or where do you like to direct people to reach out to you?
Yeah, so all of the above. I put my telephone number in the show notes there, 714-624-3896. That's my mobile. You can text me, you can call me, A Buchanan at lee-associates.com. That's my email address. Yeah, you can certainly connect with me on LinkedIn. As you know, I'm active on X. I'm active in on the Facebook platform. So I'm out there. I'm kind of hard to ignore.
Oh, I knew of you before I met you at the Massimo conference back like in 2009. I think I had first heard of you probably 2015, 2016. So at least, 10 years.
Yep.
Like, and then I think you used Client Look CRM is what I kind of
Correct.
learned about. And then started to hear about your Tuesday traffic tips and kind of dug in there. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I love it. So, well, this has been
Yeah.
great. Thank you to all my listeners for tolerating a little bit of my 4-year-old finishing up her Disney movie. She's home. I was at first gonna cancel, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna I want us to have this conversation. So I'm sure she'll be fine for a little while. So
Uh, your kiddos are so precious, and I just think that's amazing because once again that puts a timestamp. Julieta's not going to be for forever, and so I think that's just remarkable. And the fact that you're doing the balancing act now, being a mom, being a successful business owner, being a wife, being a commercial real estate influencer on social media, book author, small business owner, your Calendrino, your Calendrino Foundation, where you're helping. I just, Amy, everything you're doing, not to mention you're playing that frustrating game we all love called golf. I just think everything you're doing is
I'll be doing
amazing.
that later.
I'm a huge fan, and I'm pulling for you, my friend. I'm pulling for you to continue to do great things.
Thank you so much. One thing I want to say though too is I can do all those amazing things because I follow Rod Santomassimo's advice, and the things I don't want to do, I don't do. So then you have time for the things that you do. So I highly recommend that for anyone. So, well, this was a great conversation. I want to thank all my listeners for tuning into another episode of the Performance Mindset Show. If this show gave you something to think about, please share it and subscribe so others can learn from here. And so until the next show, Stay humble, stay kind, and keep showing up for you. This is Amy Calandrino signing off.